a bit of column A, bit of column B. I think, you know, I might have caught something off of the plague vector. He's coughing too. Then equally, he's allergic to life. So, you know, look at my kid wrong, he gets a rash. I mean, he's very robust in every other way. But if anything touched his skin that's not, you know, the milk of magnesia and fucking made of alabaster, then rash instantly. I've already sworn, so I better do this thing, haven't I? Apologies. I did it before the disclaimer. Incoming. Welcome to History After Dark. It's just gone 8:15. We called it that because we made it after dark. It's currently dark. You're welcome. We also called it that because on our other social media platforms, we are all as pure as the driven. But here, we like to indulge in four-letter expletives, as you might have noticed. We like to let our freak flags fly. We like to do some smart innuendo, general filth and depravity. So, with that being said, if you are in an open plan office with a judgmental boss, put a headphone in. If you're in a kitchen, a car, a living room, some other space with a small child, we call this child Timmy. As our merch says, Timmy is a problem. Timmy is the sort of child that hears one depraved thing once, locks it away in his little mind palace, takes it to school with him, tells his teacher, in my head she's Miss Honey, about this depraved thing. She doesn't watch History After Dark or listen to it, so she doesn't know the first cardinal rule of History After Dark, which is, if you don't know what it means, don't Google it. It's not for you, and that's fine. Not everything's for everybody. So she Googles it. Now she is utterly corrupted. She's short-circuited. She's in the corner crying. You've been called at the school. You've got to explain why Timmy knows this unspeakable atrocity of a thing that he's just said. And also, you're now paying for Miss Honey's therapy. It's going to take a lot. She's fully lost it. So put a headphone in. Alternatively, you can always watch it on the playback. With that being said, it's always worth watching us live because on one occasion we did say something that was so vile that we had to yeet the footage into the sun because we're all too pretty for prison. And we haven't done it since, or maybe we have. Basically, one of three things has happened. Either we have got better about what we say, unlikely, or we're due another vulgarity, more likely. Third one, possibly the most likely, our standards have fallen so low that the bar is now in hell, and things that 6 months ago would have got yeeted are now just floating around in the
everyday occurrences.
So watch us live, but there is probably very likely going to be a playback because we clearly don't care anymore. Other rules that we have. We hope you're all adults. Lucas, go to bed. So we aren't going to tell you what to do. In that context, this is not a drinking game. We don't approve that message. This will never be legal or medical advice. Please don't sue. Last, by no means least, this is a bespoke, handcrafted disclaimer in which we have told you exactly what to expect. If on this platform or any of our other platforms, I happen to see somebody come in, sneak into the comments like a stoat and go, oh, it's very funny, or I like the history, but the swearing's not very ladylike. First of all, fuck you. Second of all, I'm not going to pin your comment because I know that's what you want, because you want to be shamed publicly, because that's your kink. And look, kinks are fine. You find yourself a dominatrix named Bethan who will happily put a cigarette out on your nipples and stand on your bollocks in stilettos. If that tickles your pickle, my love, pay the money, you ride the ride. But kink without consent is not okay. That is the last rule of Fight Club. Sorry, History After Dark. We're talking about Princess Charlotte.
I love how it's more and more violent in the sex dungeon every week.
But her name gets nicer. Her name becomes nicer.
But the violence
increases.
Dungeon.
That's always the way. That's always the way.
That's how it works.
That's commonly known. Wait till I get to Flora.
Flora.
She's got a car battery and she is not afraid to use it.
I love it. It reminds me today of the Eleanor has just said that she's just been watching me talk about Arthur Tudor. I did Arthur Tudor back in September and I did him again today, as it were. Because when I looked, I thought, I can't do it again. It was the one where I swore and I had to delete it.
Oh.
So yeah.
That was fabulous.
It was deserved. I would do the same again.
It was absolutely deserved.
And just the way you sent the clip to us and went, I've gone full had on my live. I was like, what's she done? Oh, that's what she did. Oh well.
Yeah. Whoops.
And I definitely approved that message. I was like, well, fuck around and find out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was one of those situations.
I've just spotted this, Alicia.
Yeah.
Where can I send a PPP? It's going across the bottom. History After Dark 2021 at gmail.com. Please do send us your PPPs. We love them.
Steve, I'm gonna tell you now. I don't even want to know.
No, God,
what
no.
an ecclesiastical sex dungeon looks like, because I mean, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Anyone who's that potentially into a hair shirt, do you know what? You crack on. You crack on, cherub.
The Bishop of Bath and Wells always makes me think of that episode of Blackadder. I am the baby-eating Bishop of Bath and Wells, and they paint him in a very compromising position with Lord Percival. Yeah. Anyway,
so I'm going first tonight, and we are discussing Princess Charlotte, or Charlotte, Princess of Wales. She was the heir of Hanover.
Would you like a picture?
And look at her.
Got a messy bun. We like that.
She has. Yeah. She's looking glorious. Beautiful. She was the great hope of the Hanoverian dynasty. Her father, George IV, who is perhaps best known as the Prince Regent, or also for most of his life, the Prince of Wales. Satirists would sometimes not refer to Wales the country, but Wales the large marine mammal, on account of him being a gouty meat sack. I'm going to talk about, in looking at Charlotte's life, I am tasked with setting the scene, shall we say. So I will be starting off from before she was even a twinkle in her daddy's ball bag. I'm going to start with who her parents were. So her mother, Caroline, she's born in Brunswick. She is the cousin of her future husband, George IV. This is not uncommon. A bit of cousin marriage is highly sought after.
And often achieved.
Both Caroline and George have their peccadillos and their moments. I'm going to start with George very, very quickly. How does George end up marrying his cousin? Because he's not keen on the idea, and it only gets worse afterwards. George IV is a pampered, spoilt princeling. He himself talks about how he is rather too fond of wine and women. That would not stop. He has a lustful gaze that roves around the kingdom. He is profligate. There are rumours that he sleeps with a wife of a groom, one of his mother's maids of honour, a courtesan, but his favourite were actresses. We have no idea how many bastards he is responsible for, but there's probably a round-faced cherub in virtually every great house in the land. On top of being a massive shagger, he is also very bad with money. He is, because he's got to pay off mistresses. He's got to support them. He's got to, try and keep the amount of babies a little bit quiet. He is semi in love with Beau Brummel, so he wants to dress like the dandies of the age. Laundering that amount of clothing costs a small fortune. He, as we know, likes food and booze. On top of this, he's a gambler. Apparently, one year, his stables alone cost him £31,000. If you've ever been to the Brighton Pavilion, next door to the Brighton Pavilion, it's now a theatre. It's called the Brighton Dome. And it's this lovely space with this beautiful ceiling. That was apparently George's stables. His horses slept better than his servants. He has, as he becomes Prince of Wales, as he reaches his majority, he gets Carlton House, he gets financial arrangements. Anybody who is not an absolute spendthrift would have been able to live on this amount. He's got an income of £50,000 a year. He's got the Duchy of Cornwall's revenues. He's on top of that, there's another £12,000 a year from the Duchy of Cornwall, plus a capital sum of 60,000. So that is, from 21, he has got £122,000. So in 2017 money, that is approximately £10.5 million. He ain't short a few bob. Nevertheless, he runs up screaming amounts of debt. While this is all going on, he is pursuing his ladies. One that he becomes obsessed with is a woman called Maria Fitzherbert. She's a Roman Catholic, and she's been married twice before, and she's been widowed twice already. He nevertheless says he's going to marry her. This is against the Marriages Act because she's a Roman Catholic. Also, he's doing it without permission, also against the Marriages Act. She declines the marriage, tries to leave. He stabs himself and then threatens that if she doesn't come to him at once and become his affianced, he will open up his wounds and bleed to death. This is bad times all around. She is concerned and goes and says, I will marry you. When she can get away from him, she repudiates the engagement, goes to the continent. He is bombarding her with letters. She comes back. They have this secret marriage. The clergyman who marries them has been bailed out of the Fleet prison to do the job. The whole thing is just an absolute shit show. All of it comes to a head, and basically George needs his debts paid. And he is told, you need to provide a legitimate heir. Whatever is going on here needs to stop. So Maria Fitzherbert, I think, no doubt, thinks for the blessed relief that she finally gets out of this horror show of a marriage with this absolute unmitigated nutter. And it's decided that George will marry his cousin Caroline. They are going to marry on the 8th of April, 1795. They meet for the first time in the same month they're due to marry. The meeting does not go well.
Surprise.
Does not go well. Caroline had been collected from Brunswick by George's friend, a guy called Lord Malmesbury. He isn't sure. He's concerned about Caroline's behaviour and apparently about some of her, should we say, personal attributes. He recognises that she is cheerful and good-natured, but he also describes her as, quote, gauche, boisterous, tactless, and talkative. He also is concerned about, quote, loose conduct, indecent language, and a lack of hygiene.
Who?
Yes. The first two, the loose conduct and indecent language, I'm like, come sit by me, but maybe put some deodorant on first. For their first meeting, George gets pissed on brandy, and that theme continues. On the day of the wedding, he is absolutely hammered. He is so pissed.
Lottoed.
Yeah, he can scarcely stand when he's supposed to be saying the vows. And on the wedding night itself, he's so pissed that apparently he passes out in the fireplace of the bridal bedroom. So on that night, the marriage is not consummated. Seemingly, or reportedly, it does happen the following morning. And I cannot think of anything worse than having an absolutely screaming hangover and trying to rot your way into an heir. That must be deeply unpleasant for all concerned.
He would have stank as well.
He must have smelled like
stinkers all the way around,
sweating meat and alcohol out of every pore.
People who are smell a bit like hamster cages, don't they?
Oh gosh, yeah, dog breath to the extreme. Just nothing nice about that. Either way, clearly, once was enough, and I'm sure both parties were very glad of that fact.
Back of the net,
back of the net, deep in the uterus, in the phallopes, baby conceived.
That was
Princess Charlotte Augusta is born on the 7th of January, 1796. If you do your mathematics from the 8th of April, 1795 to the 7th of January, 1796, that is almost to the day, exactly 9 months after the wedding.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah. So this is where we are. She has been born. It doesn't, after the birth, within a year of the birth, the marriage has just broken down beyond repair. They are living separate lives. Charlotte and Caroline depart from Carlton House, and then they go into their own rented house at Blackheath. Caroline leaves. She tries to see Charlotte. The prince refuses to allow her to see Charlotte, but the king, George III, intervenes in Caroline's favour. Caroline then starts using her rented accommodation to meet with various politicians, both Whig and Tory. In these meetings, where I think she's probably trying to safeguard her future place as the future Queen of England, and also the place of her daughter, that these meetings do start rumours that she's having extramarital affairs. Of course, it is possible that she was in fact having extramarital affairs. It gets to the point where there's claims that she's given birth to a child outside of her marriage. In 1806, there was an official inquiry, and although no child was found to exist, her behaviour, or rather the levity of conduct that she displayed, did get remarked upon. So Caroline and her husband hate each other. Caroline, it also, though, in essence, forms a rift between the marriage up the family tree, because George III is on Caroline's side, whereas her mother-in-law, Queen Charlotte, is on George IV's side. Then, of course, we get the fact that in 1810, George III has this pronounced period of mental decline. So great that it's deemed necessary for his son, George, to be sworn in as Prince Regent on the 5th of February, 1811. From that point, Caroline is no longer welcome at court. Access to Charlotte for Caroline is more and more restricted. This is the backdrop. This is the chaos into which Princess Charlotte, Princess of Wales, is born. And from all the accounts we see, as she grows up, she does seem to have quite a roundabout view of the situation. I think she recognises that her mother's behaviour lacks somewhat as it should be for a future Queen of England, potentially. That in this behaviour, she arguably gives her father, the future king, grounds to end the marriage. That equally, in doing so, in this kind of levity of behaviour, she in some ways might even threaten Charlotte's own place. It might cause questions about her own legitimacy. It is an issue of heirs. It is reported that Charlotte said, or wrote later, quote, "My mother was wicked, but she would not have turned so wicked had my father not been much more wicked still." In 1813, there's a massive row over where Charlotte's going to live. She had been enjoying her own household separate from both her parents, which I think must have been very relieving. But now her father wants her to come and live at Carlton House. Charlotte runs to her mother, but is ultimately convinced to go and live with her father and do as he wishes. After this, Caroline, her mother, decides to go off traveling the continent. All this time she's being watched, she's being spied on, and when she goes on this sort of grand tour, her leaving, that is the last time that she will see her daughter. But things are going to get much more tense for Charlotte because the question of her marriage is going to come up. And I believe my colleague, my esteemed colleague, Catherine, is going to cover that.
I am. But first.
Is it me?
Yes. Ready?
Oh no, I need to find it. Bugger.
Cat, sing the jingle.
I'm just having a little cough. Word of the week, word of the week, word of the week, word of the week.
Yes. There we go.
It feels like ages since I've done one. I hope I haven't done this before, but you can see.
I think you were pissed the last time you did one because you couldn't pronounce it.
I don't think that was anything to do with the wine.
I think it was the espresso martini that finished you.
Oh yeah, maybe that was what did it. I more got the giggles because I thought I went to say this is how you pronounce it and then couldn't pronounce it. But anyway, okay. So if I've done this already, I apologise, but let's give it a go. Elflock.
It's rude.
Is the word?
Elflock yourself.
Elflock off.
A very small chastity belt.
No.
Elflock.
Elflock.
Elf.
Is it something to do with witchcraft or magic?
So that's kind of where the inspiration for it comes from.
The prevention of
like
magical stuff.
Yeah, something coming apart, or
is it to bind bad? Is it like evil eye type thing to bind ill omens?
Oh right, so it's also with hair. So lock, as in lock of hair, rather than.
Oh, is this a thing where something backcombs your hair, and it's a sign the elves have been with you?
It's the elves in the 70s.
No, it's the 80s perm elves. That's what it is.
Not the 80s beehive elves, the 70s beehive elves.
Yeah, they're the 60s,
elves.
they? This is the 80s beehive elves. No, in God's sake. I think I should go to bed. So Elizabeth has got it. It's basically if you have very wavy hair, which I don't clearly, so I'm afraid I can't empathise here, and you wake up with it all tangled and mangled, that's elflock, as though elves have tied it into knots while you've been asleep.
You see, mine just sticks out like.
Yeah, mine doesn't really do anything of interest.
See, my hair is poker straight with a slight wave, if that makes sense. But I don't believe in ghosts. I've said this before, apart from ones that I've met. And when I was just 18, I worked in a pub in Hertfordshire. I was not a good barmaid, but I kept around. I've never been a good barmaid, but most pubs used to keep me around because they didn't have to hire security, because I was the kind of psycho that would vault the bar and break up a fight. So I was mostly kept around because I was like a tiny, angry Rottweiler. But one night after closing, the pub landlord of this pub was talking about, because he lived upstairs, and he might have been trying to scare me, but he was talking about how there was a ghost. And I'm like, yeah, all right. And he was telling the story about, because they had this like bottle of coins on the bar and it had gone. And he said that this had happened, that it had broken, right, in this ghost encounter. And while he's telling this story and he's talking about, and things would be weird, like they used to have glasses hanging over your head and you'd be stood still and one would just start moving, right? And while he's telling this story and all the lights are basically down apart from the ones just around the bar, there's this crash out in the back room, a crash in the back bar. There's a crash in the corner. The security sensor, you know those ones where if you move, a light comes on and stays on. This one is strobing. I've never seen a security light do it. The fireplace that has not been lit the entire time I've been there. In fact, there are plants in it, like flowers. Suddenly there is a smell of burning wood. And there's another crash behind. Like it's like bang, 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 right? And I've got my hair like half up, half down. I make my excuses and I foxtrot Oscar right quick. By the time I get home, the entirety of the back of my hair is just a mat. It took me 20 minutes to brush my hair out. It was like someone had sat behind me and done this.
And backcombed
like half a
Maybe they had.
famous backcombing ghost.
Look, I don't believe in ghosts apart from ones I've met.
You do believe in them, you just don't want to.
Column A,
They
column B.
Keep showing themselves to you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see, they want that.
cool.
Cat. They want you to know they're there. They want you to know they're there. It's all very well you trying to pretend they're not. They're just
I've got to say, the thing that really messed me up was the fact it was that kind of, it was like a motion sensor, and you know, they've got those tiny little green lights that just go on and stay on till no one moves.
Yeah.
And the fact this light was strobing, I'm like, I've never seen one of those do that before.
Not the wood smell from the fire that's never burned. Or the
Yeah,
big
that was also
crashes.
weird. I'll give you that. That was
Just
also
the
weird.
tiny green light. That's the problem.
Yeah. But like, I thought, you know, sometimes your sense can play tricks on you. You know, you're in a space and you might see the fire and like it triggers a memory. But to visually see a light strobing.
Yeah. I used to work in a very old
out.
pub. I don't remember any ghosts, unfortunately.
They're coming for you, Kat. They're coming
No.
for you.
The one I
They're
had to court likes me. We're buds.
There you go.
That doesn't mean they'll all like you.
She messes about with me, but we have an agreement.
The thing
She and
is,
I.
it's like most of them are fine. It's just fine. You just got to not worry about it. You worry about it, you're going to get stressed out. You don't worry about it, it's going to be fine.
I mean, it is what it is.
I don't think they like me.
Well, apparently they don't like Kat very much. The one in the lower salt tower that tried to kill you, and then that one as well.
In fairness, when people have gone in there that have kind of ghostly premonitions, they get very upset in that room.
It's not nice in there, but
It's not a nice place anyway, is it?
No. Especially when you sit there and hear a blue badge guy talking absolute unbridled shite.
I did. I have a word with you.
Scott, I don't know who the ghost is at Hampton Court. It does happen in the old Queen's apartments because that is now the ladies' changing rooms. But
Sarah Slater thinks it is. Oh goodness me, Elizabeth I, Sybil Penn.
Okay.
Oh, her
the nurse.
One of her, who she died of when Elizabeth I caught smallpox. She actually died from it, nursing her.
Well, whoever it is, it's definitely female. I don't know how I can tell you that, but it's definitely a lady. And she's tricksy because I find like you put something down and the second you put it down, you turn away and then it's gone. And you have to be like, I noticed that my thing has left, whatever you name the thing. Hello, I've spotted that my thing has been moved. It's very funny. I'm going to leave the room now and come back in. I'd like it to be where I put it. I know you're here. Thank you for making your presence known. The weirdest one is a few months ago, we were there and the cleaner came out of the ladies' changing room and went, there's a bird in the changing room. And like the windows were all closed, but there was, I think she said it was like a crow or a magpie. And everyone said, oh, well, it's come down the chimney. But those chimneys aren't lit. They're full of absolute crap. If it had come through the chimney, there would be shit all over the floor. There wasn't. there was some bird poo, but there wasn't the interior of a chimney, but there was just a fucking bird.
Yeah. Well,
Ghost.
we'll have to do ghost stories. We'll have to build. We'll have to store these up and do them at Halloween.
We did do one on ghosts, didn't we, ages ago? It was hilarious.
We did.
Yeah,
That's not our own stories.
We're just going, I don't like it. I think it's on Instagram. I don't like it.
I don't like it.
I don't like
You got more to add to it now.
Yeah.
I know.
But yeah. Should we talk about someone else who's dead?
Yeah, cool.
Very dead. Very dead indeed. Okay, so Princess Charlotte, with her delightful parents, whose dysfunction obviously had an effect on her, as it would on many people. But she's apparently very beautiful, and I can see her father in her. With that
Do you want me to get a picture back up?
with the nose. But apparently it was very, very beautiful, quite alluring.
I mean, you can see the version of her father that he had his artist's airbrush into just not a wrinkle in sight. So yes, I think he's modeling. He's trying to look as beautiful as his daughter,
and failing.
But yeah, it's bullshit.
It is very much that. Yes. So she's seen as a bit rebellious. She's seen as a bit of a reckless tomboy around the court. Her fashion choices were seen as a little bit risque. You could see her ankles. The garments around her ankles. I know it's shocking, isn't it? And she was considered, especially for a lady, to be very frank, very upfront with people. So she was quite, she was sort of regarded as a little bit brash, perhaps a little bit upfront, a little bit not as ladylike, perhaps as she should have been, but she was still popular nonetheless. Now, I feel like her mother and father did their respective bits of damage of her, but obviously she really wanted to be a woman in her own right, and we see this rebellious streak, and she would not be kept down by her slightly questionable parents. So love interest. So we do see Charlotte ultimately, of course, get married to a man it appears that she loved very much. But in the interim, she found herself attracted to a number of young men, but also presented to one that she found she really couldn't care much less for. And it's all a little bit soap opera-y, isn't it? So she had a love interest called Captain George Fitzclarence. This was in October 1811, and he was the eldest son of her uncle, the Duke of Clarence, by the actress Mrs. Jordan. Now, this one here is one I've been able to find in some sources and not others. So I have highlighted him here just to say that I've only found him in one or two places, but another place he seems to be absent. So take this one as a little bit of an initial pinch of salt. But he was the illegitimate son of an actress called Mrs. Jordan, and who arrived in London from Portugal. But he was about to join the Prince's regiment in Brighton, and after some rides together at Windsor, which scandalised her aunts, she was obliged to say goodbye to him. So let me know if you come across that one again, because I only found him in one place. And I wasn't able to find him again, but I wanted to mention him in case anybody else did. Anyway, now we will bring ourselves to another inappropriate suitor whose many of you may have heard of, Charles Hesse, who was a captain of the 18th Light Dragoons and had a terrible reputation. And I believe he was another illegitimate son of one of her uncles. But anyway, this time...
He's Mr. Wickham, isn't he, basically?
Yes.
He's
Wickham. She was determined to have her man, absolutely determined. And she had her household set up, and there were a number of secret meetings facilitated there with Charles. And everyone seemed to like and approve of Hesse, except her father, and they all accepted that they were having these private meetings together and accepted this scandalous behaviour because they disliked her father so much they were prepared to sort of oversee Charles Hesse's position and behaviours. Anyway, in 1813, she was almost 18 years old, so she was almost an adult. So we've got this one character down already. And he had been shipped off to war, Hesse again, and she was on the marriage market, and he was on the marriage market. So it was looking quite good. But she had to, despite what she wanted, she had to expect a marriage that was going to be basically based on political motivation, wasn't she? She couldn't really expect not to be too much in that position. Her father, George, really didn't care much for her emotions, for Hesse's emotions, or the emotions of absolutely anybody, full stop, quite frankly. And his choice of marriage, let's put Charles Hesse aside, we're going to forget about him. Charlie, have nothing to do with him. I don't care how much you like him. We have got, her father said, we have got here this young man. My candidate for marriage with you, my dear, is William, hereditary Prince of Orange. Okay, and this will improve the relationships between the Netherlands and UK. So politically, it's very beneficial. But there was no spark between them at all, just none. It was like, oh, here's this candidate for marriage. Oh, okay, then. And not necessarily, again, that would have mattered, that the people in question would have cared, and it would have been nice for these two people to have a bit of a spark between them. But the point of the matter was that there wasn't really anything at all. And her father had a birthday party on the 12th of August, 1813, where they did get engaged, but not for very long. So there's this birthday party, and William and all of the men involved got absolutely annihilated, like hammered to the nth extreme. And Charlotte's just a bit like, well, that's attractive, isn't it? Thanks for that. That's just marvelous.
Can't even hear.
It's just entirely unimpressed by the state of what has rocked up here. But it put her off of them completely. She did not want to marry him. She didn't want to have anything to do with him. And she would not hide her disdain from this man either. And there was a chap there called Dr. Henry Halford, and who said, he was said, I will marry, I will, she said, I'm going to start that again. We're going to start those words again. So Charlotte was asked by Henry Halford, Dr. Henry Halford, what she thought of William of Orange after this very embarrassing to do at this party. And she replied, marry, I will. And that directly in order to enjoy my liberty, but not the Prince of Orange. I think him so ugly that I am almost obliged to turn my head away in disgust when he is speaking to me. So,
not a good start.
Not the best of starts, no. So anyway, her father, the Prince Regent George, finds out how she feels about this. She doesn't want to go ahead with this engagement, and he's furious. He's always furious. He's furious. And it had been bandied around this time that she would have an engagement and a marriage with Prince William Frederick, the Duke of Gloucester and Edinburgh. So he had been considered a match. But the Prince Regent wasn't happy about that either. He was completely opposed to this as a union as well. So there's all this, she's saying, well, maybe if I don't marry William of Orange, there is this gentleman in the mix as well. And her father was, no, I'm all about William of Orange. And she was like, no, I'd much rather have the Duke of Gloucester. But rather
have a very, very close relative.
Yes, there was basically, well, it's two things. There's firstly, yes, closely related. But secondly, he went on to marry her cousin Mary. So, hooray. But yes, he was very abusive to both his daughter and the Duke of Gloucester. But because there was the one marriage with William on the one hand that her father was proposing to the nation, but then this was this other one that was being given all this public attention. So it was, would she marry the orange or the cheese? Gloucester cheese. That was what was in the press. She married the orange or the cheese. And the public, I think, were just pretty happy to take the piss out of both of them. I don't think they were massively enamored with William. They didn't really want that as a match for her. They knew her mother opposed it. And basically anything that the king wanted that everyone else didn't, the public was for, because nobody liked him, essentially, in a nutshell. But yes, the Duke of Gloucester married in 1816 to her cousin, Charlotte's cousin, Princess Mary, who was the daughter of George III. Now, hope springs eternal. So on December the 12th, 1813, George arranged another dinner party for another meeting with Charlotte and William, hoping it might help. You know, because if you meet someone once and you hate them, meeting them twice is going to make all the difference. And he asked her at the end of the night to reconsider her opinion. And so she gave a bit of a non-committal response, going, yeah, he's all right. Like just kind of like a passing comment. He interpreted that as, that's fantastic, I want to marry him immediately. And called William to go, yeah, it's on, mate, it's on. Okay, now bizarrely, I don't know exactly what changed, because she still had this thing in the back of her head for, you know, she hadn't completely got Hess out of her system. There were other men around, but she did actually sign the preliminary marriage contract to marry Prince William of Orange, which obviously ended badly. She was concerned about the letters that she'd sent to Hess during their courtship, and she managed to track him down, but he was, I don't know if he was fine with it, or if he had to be gently persuaded to make sure that those letters never came into the public arena. But if they did still exist, they never did, so we won't know what happened to those. But obviously he was a little bit of a blot on her copybook, if you want to look at it that way. So no one really is like this mismarriage between Charlotte and William really was all about her father, because actually nobody really wanted to see the two thrones unite either. This was a thing George had in his head, and I can't help thinking at this stage part of it was him just going, I'm going to have my own way, because I'm perpetually a spoilt, petulant child and nobody else wants it, and it's really stupid at this point because it makes no sense, but I want it and you're all going to do as you're told. That's kind of how it comes across. But if they had two sons, or at least two, the eldest one would sort of get Britain and be the king in Britain, and the second son would inherit the Netherlands. If they only had one son, the Netherlands would pass to the German branch of the House of Orange. So it's all kind of bit, you have that bit and you have that bit. So it's very sketchy and fragmented, and it's not really what anybody wants. But George was the only one that seemed happy about all of this. But despite her having signed this marriage contract, she had developed a huge crush on a Prussian prince. So she has actually forgot Charles Hess at the moment. And we don't know if it was Prince Augustus or Prince Frederick, but it was not unknown for her to invite a gentleman to for a private chat after a social event. So it could have been, this is where she'd entertain one of these gentlemen. She'd met one of these gentlemen. Now, here's a chap you'll see again in a minute. One of these gentlemen who very famously came after a party and spent a little bit of one-to-one time with her was Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, who spent 45 minutes alone with her after a party, with a little bit of a nudge from her mother, and apparently he was a little bit mortified about his behaviour after this, and wrote to her father to apologise for his indiscretion, which did impress her father. So 10th of June 1814, she'd signed this contract, but the negotiations for the marriage took several months. She insisted that she would not leave England and go over to the Netherlands, and that her mother would be allowed to visit her in her home, because of course her husband hated her, her father hated her mother, but because he was trying to sort of keep on the good side of her father, William was like, no, I'm going to basically let George have what he wants, and Charlotte will not be allowed to have her mother in her home, and she may have to leave England as well, because he was very much under her father's thumb. He was really kissing George's arse, is what this came down to at the end of the day. But Charlotte's mother continued to oppose the match. The public continued to oppose the match. It's doing that feedbacky thing again. It's doing, I'm really sorry. I don't know why it's doing it. I don't know.
Maybe turn your volume down a bit, maybe.
Yeah, I haven't touched anything else. That's what's weird.
No.
Okay, I don't know. I'm really sorry. All right, so the crowds were out in public, calling out for Charlotte, lending her support, urging her not to marry the Prince of Orange. And in fact, the engagement did collapse completely. So her father is furious. He is incandescent with rage at his daughter that she's allowed this marriage is going to get called off, that it's over with. This is just not something that women did, that this young lady should be doing. And he essentially put her under house arrest until he could take her to Windsor Castle and sort of basically just keep her there, keep her really, really locked away. And so she, see if that helps. Does that help? Anyway, she heard of the plan for basically to take her, whisk her away, and be locked away. And so she ran out into the street to escape. She basically panicked and ran into the street, where a bystander saw her, saw how extremely upset she was, and got her into a carriage, into a hackney carriage, to get her taken to her mother. So again, this is very unusual behavior, and she was just absolutely distraught. And so her mother wasn't there, but she returned home. Okay. And she'd heard that her daughter was on her way. Now, she then became known, you may have heard this, as the Runaway Princess, because she ran away. And she was under house arrest at Cranbourne House, to be watched every second of the day from every single person, because she had brought shame to her family. All right, and was not to be trusted. So she needed, according to her father, she needed to be kept locked away. She needed to be watched 24/7. So that's really suffocating, isn't it? For a young woman, a beautiful young woman in her prime, wanting to come out, wanting to make a good marriage. She falls very easily. She loves the company of gentlemen, not always very gentle gentlemen. And now she's basically being locked away. All right, the former Whig MP and future Tory Chancellor Henry Brougham said, very publicly stated, that everyone was against the prince. So Charlotte constantly being sort of admired, seen as beloved, seen as the right person to take the country forward over her father. And she managed to sneak a note to her favourite uncle, Prince Augustus, Duke of Sussex. And he questioned the Prime Minister, Lord Liverpool, in the House of Commons as to whether or not it was legal to keep her locked up by this. And so her brother, George, went absolutely mad, because she had sent this note to his brother, and he berated them both again, went absolutely mad at them again. And he never trusted George, never trusted his brother again. So all these relationships are breaking down. George is getting less and less popular. Charlotte still has these family ties, even with people she's not allowed to see anymore, because she's just so much cherished by the people around her, both more widely and within that little sphere. However, the life she had when she was sort of at house arrest wasn't as intolerable as she believed it was going to be. And in July 1814, her father came to her. They did have periods of sort of reconciliation, but he told her that her mother, as Kat mentioned, was going to be leaving for the continent. And she was very upset. She felt a little bit like her mother had abandoned her, but she knew there's probably nothing she could do. And in fact, she never saw her mother again, or any sort of, so therefore any sort of a safety net her mother may have provided for her. Now, she had been told to take to the shore to get the sea air, and her father permitted her to visit Weymouth in August. She wanted to go to Brighton because that was very fashionable, but he said no. And there, they again really went for Charlotte. So they hosted an illuminations, and the centrepiece was "Hail Prince Charlotte, Europe's hope and England's glory." So I think the message there is very, very clear. She still, though, at this point, despite the crush on her Prussian prince, had no serious marriage project. And the problem was, whoever this prince may or may not have been, would have to come forward and speak with Charlotte's father, with George, and sort of present himself. And nobody did. Nobody knew anything about this. So before Christmas 1814, she's there. I don't know exactly where he was or who he was, but she heard that he had found a new lover, and she was absolutely devastated. She'd been writing about him and all sorts of things. However, she had a plan B. In her back pocket was 45 minutes well spent with Prince Leopold Saxe-Coburg, I can't pronounce it properly. And because the Prussian prince and sort of was off the table, whoever he may or may not have been, here was a reliable young man of whose company she enjoyed and who was generally well thought of. However, he wasn't very wealthy. But by early 1815, she decided that this was a man that she could accept in marriage, and she didn't want to lose somebody else who she had a love or a fondness for. But it wasn't going to be easy. obviously because of her father, mostly because he still wanted her to marry William of Orange. I don't know at what point in his head this actually the penny dropped, this wasn't gonna thing, because at this point he had also been engaged to somebody else, the Grand Duchess Anna Pavlovna of Russia. So at this point he kind of had to drop the William of Orange thing, and then Leopold was off on the continent fighting Napoleon, and so she wasn't sure, would she be able to get him interested? Did he remember her with enough fondness? So she was getting messages to him. They were exchanging letters through third parties, and she got the impression that he was actually quite keen to pursue this courtship with her. But her father was like, nope, you're having absolutely none of that. No. So she's like, no, I'm not taking this nonsense off of you anymore. But she takes a different tack. She goes down to Brighton and she sat at his feet and she basically begged him. She tactfully kind of said, look, you know, we've been getting on better recently. I really like this man. If it was me, I'd have gone, look at the other options, you know, have some common sense about this. But I think he would be a very good husband. You know, I really like him and I'm really asking you very seriously with my hand on my heart for you to consider this. So he was like, I'm still not sure. But he said, okay, I will meet with him and I will interview him if you like. Because he also felt that, you know, he was away at war. He was not a wealthy man. He was well renowned for sort of not being very wealthy. And these were not things that George really wanted for his daughter or would have felt suitable. But he met with him and he interviewed him, if you like, and he made him sweat. But he found him very agreeable. He actually quite liked him and he could see that his daughter liked him. But it could be worse, basically. So he basically agreed and Charlotte was thrilled. Yay. And she wrote, I find him charming and go to bed happier than I ever have done yet in my life. I am certainly a very fortunate creature and have God to bless. A princess never, I believe, set out in life or married with such prospects of happiness, real domestic ones like other people. So she was sent back to Cranbourne and Leopold stayed with her father, and the British House of Commons received the news that they were to be engaged. Leopold was naturalised as a British citizen and they were given an income of £50,000 a year and Claremont House as their marital house. And they seemed to be very in love. This really did seem to be a good match in that respect. On the 2nd of May, 1816, they were married at Carlton House in the Crimson Drawing Room. Enormous crowds filled the city of London. It made it very hard for people to navigate the city. People travelling found it almost impossible because they were personally very glad she wasn't marrying William, but she was so, people just adored her. She was so beloved. People were so excited. They were so happy to see this match and the future of the monarchy panning out with someone who wasn't a massive arsehole, i.e. her father. And it was a very lavish affair. The only bit where I don't think reflects massively well on her is that when he promised her all of his worldly goods, she started laughing because he didn't really have any. But, you know, she was rich enough for the both of them. So there we go. It was a very popular match. It was celebrated very widely. They honeymooned at Oatlands Palace, which apparently smelt really badly of dogs. And they were both a little bit unwell, but they had a lovely honeymoon, apparently. They were extremely happy. The marriage got off to a wonderful start. She said he was a wonderful lover. TMI, love. There they are, look.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I'm very happy. It's a good job Philippa does all this stuff because I have no idea. And it was said from sort of being that sort of opinionated, flighty tomboy who was a little bit brash and all these types of things. People said he seemed to be a very calming influence on her. She became much warmer and tender. She was a very loving person. After their honeymoon, they threw themselves into the London social scene where people were extremely pleased to receive them. And they were very warmly greeted wherever they went. And it's around that time when they were coming back onto this social scene that it was announced that she had suffered her first pregnancy loss, and they did retreat a little bit for some private time, and then they came out again and started making appearances for her 21st birthday. And they were basically, their marriage was described that they were very content together, very much in love. He was a very good influence on her. Now, around April 1817, Charlotte fell pregnant again. Leopold informed her father, because they were all getting on quite well by this stage, and said this time she was expected to carry the baby to term. And the nation was very, very excited. Everybody was really filled with hope. And even the betting shops got involved, betting on the gender of the child. So some things, have been centuries-old traditions. But a lot of people felt that things did not seem right with her pregnancy. And there was a chap called Richard Croft, who Philippa will talk about more.
Yes, you're starting to get into my bit now. You can stop.
I just said he was comes into, and he was to be dealt. Have you talked about her symptoms of her pregnancy?
I'll deal with it. Yes.
Okay then. So basically, I only had a paragraph, but I'll let you do. Basically, this is where we got to. So everyone was very positive. They were very optimistic. It seemed like a royal baby was on the horizon for an absolutely adored Oh no, I was going to say people's princess. Then, oh God, we don't want to go down that route, do we?
She was the people's princess. That is exactly
and also those correlations were absolutely drawn. When Princess Diana died, correlations between
English Rose,
Charlotte and Diana, those correlations were absolutely drawn by historians at the time. It was absolutely part of the discourse around the way the public reacted, and it continues to be. In fact, when people talk about Charlotte, and I'm sure Philippa will talk about this, and they talk about the response to what happened, those parallels are it's where everyone goes.
It makes me really uncomfortable, though, which isn't anybody else's problem. Just no, don't say that.
That's what it is. I mean, she wears roses in her hair. She literally is the original English Rose. Diana gets that moniker as well, but Princess Charlotte just was it. So that's just is the case.
Yeah,
nothing to be sensitive about.
No, I don't. It just gives me, I don't know. It just feels a bit weird. Anyway, she's less dead, isn't she? So we can't really discuss that.
Yes.
Anyway.
Are we doing a
Are they here? Are they here?
Oh, hold on then. 2 seconds. I forgot.
I don't know where it is. Oh dear. Look at that lovely photo of Philippa. She looks very posh in that picture, doesn't she? She is very posh. She looks extra very posh in that picture.
Extra posh.
Extra posh. Posh with extra bits.
I was in a professional photo shoot, so I suppose that's there you go. Not quite so posh.
Right. we're all very posh. Don't know what you're on about.
True.
So there we go. Are we ready?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
Dear widows, I am here to join two of your previous authors together, even though they are unaware of each other's existence. A number of weeks ago, you mentioned a young lady whose family had betrothed her to an awful gentleman. Well, equal in her status, but very unpleasant. But she had fallen for me, a humble pig farmer, and she wanted us to run away, but was unsure how to face the wrath of her family. I confess, I was not interested in her advances, despite the fact that she is a beautiful and kind lady, and I felt very sad for her in her predicament. However, being a pig farmer isn't as good as it's cracked up to be, and her offers of gifts, fine living, wealth, good food, a warm bed were very, very tempting. And the more I felt about this life, the more I was prepared to endure the wrath of those around her and take the risk of life as this woman's husband. The problem still came, though, that I am in fact a gay man. This brings me to your last letter, where you suggested to the lady who wrote in, who had become very wealthy in her own right, that she should seek a gay husband in order to avoid all the other potential suitors. I therefore would be perfect for this second lady to fulfill this criteria. My questions to you are, firstly, could you put me in touch? And secondly, now I've decided I want this wonderful life, how can I let down the first lady who initially approached me, as I do not want to break her heart, but she is absolutely besotted with me and I fear her brothers may come for me with a large machete.
Mm.
Kind regards, Alf.
It's a tricky one, Alf. It's a tricky one. I think when it comes to your issue about putting her off, you've got two choices. Either you could play it two ways. Perhaps her interest in you is in part based upon the fact that she thinks you're playing hard to get. So come on really strong. Really strong. I'm talking flowers, chocolates, or your historical periods equivalent. Tell her that her eyes are like two limpid pools in which you would love to drown yourself while reaching for them with your thumbs. Do that. That'll freak her out. Or you have to become, if that doesn't work, flip it and become an absolute cad and bounder and let her think that you are carousing with every floozy in the local tavern. And hopefully one of those things will put her off.
What about the brothers with the machetes?
You're a pig farmer, babe. Pigs get rid of everything.
Yeah, you can manage that. I would also maybe add things. What he could do is become very amorous, but whilst covered in pig shit. So thus putting her in the position of having to put off his advances because she doesn't want to be covered in pig.
And then acting really hurt that she's turned him away.
And then he can skulk off to the other county, because I think they live in different counties for the purposes of my answer. And and it's at a time before Snapchat maps and all that. Snap maps. That shows how old I'm already. Snap maps. And he can sneak off to the other woman who we will put him in touch with.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody
Problem
have any
solved.
problem solved? What was it? Somebody put the two P's, pigs and poison.
Poison, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect
Poison.
combo.
There we go. Look how lovely that we were able to bring two people together from across the net. You know, we might have solved, created one problem, but we've solved another, and in the end, it will all be good.
I think Tori's asking if I've dyed my hair. Maybe it looks a bit darker. I don't ever dye my hair because I'm lazy. I think what's happening is that it's parted a separate way. In fact, I have never dyed my hair except when I was 15 and I dyed the bottom 2 inches pink. Apart from that, I've never dyed my hair. No dye has ever touched my scalp. Principally because I am allergic to the fucking world. And I think that my eyelids would fall off my face if I dyed my hair. So I don't. Ever.
Mine's completely natural. Can you tell?
That front piece, I've seen that happen before.
Oh God!
Yeah,
Right.
it's done for a bit.
This is, bless her. So I know probably don't. If people don't know, this is called a money piece, right? One of my ladies in my classes before I started said, "Oh, I see your money shot's still looking good."
Oh,
Bless her. Don't Google it.
Oh God. Right, should we do a sad bit now?
yeah. So I'll pick it
So this is a little bit. This is very sad, guys.
So, well, let me do it. Let me bring you down. So, like Kathy said, so Charlotte's faffed around. She's found a husband that she now really likes. Her father puts on a 21st birthday party for her, but they don't go because they prefer each other's company to the raucous party that her father would put on. And yes, so by April 1817, Prince Leopold is able to tell the Prince Regent, Charlotte's father, that she is expecting for the second time, but that they're expecting this one to go well. However, by August of 1817, her doctors are putting her on a strict diet. They think that the baby is already too big. They part of her treatment is bleeding, which English doctors are still loving, but Leopold's actually brought over his own physician, a guy called Christian Friedrich Baron von Stockmar, who's not too pleased about the fact they're bleeding her. He thinks this practice is outdated. But so she's put on this strict diet. She's being bled. She's due to give birth on the 19th of October. That date comes and goes. No sign of the baby. She finally goes into labour on the evening of the 3rd of November. So she's due on the 19th of October. She goes into labour on the 3rd of November. So goodness knows if they think this baby is already big back in August, what she's looking like by the start of November.
So what's that going to be? What, 43 weeks?
So she's going to be, another 3 weeks on.
Oh, Jesus.
So her physician, a male midwife called Sir Richard Croft, who Catherine mentioned, encourages once the labour pains begin on the evening of the 3rd, he encourages her to exercise, but he prevents her from eating, which that's not unusual. That happens now, and actually anyone who's been in labour knows that you pretty much can't eat, and anything you did eat the 12 hours before comes back up. It did with me anyway. So that's not particularly unusual, and he's encouraging her to exercise. However, the labour continues throughout the next day and into the next. Finally, after 2 days of labour, the princess gives birth to a baby boy at 9 p.m. on the 5th of November. The baby, heartbreakingly, is born, is stillborn. And Charlotte is exhausted. She's absolutely exhausted. But she's quite stoic. She is, she's just probably delirious. I would imagine after 2 days of labour and no sleep and no eating and being in labour, she just says, this is God's will. Now, her husband, Leopold, has been up the entire time. He has also not slept for 2 days. So now she has some food and she goes to sleep. He has some food, he goes to sleep. His physician gives him an opiate, and he goes into another room and goes to sleep. And that decision he's going to regret for the rest of his life. Because soon after midnight, so in the very, very early minutes of the 6th of November, Charlotte begins violently vomiting. She's complaining of intense abdominal pain. So her male midwife, Sir Richard Croft, is called for. When he gets there, he finds her cold to the touch. She's having difficulty breathing and she's losing blood. He applies hot compresses, which, believe it or not, was a accepted treatment for postpartum bleeding. Just stick a warm compress there, well, that'll do the job. And he calls for Stockmar being Leopold's physician that he's brought him over. He calls for Stockmar and says, "Go and get the prince." Leopold hasn't slept for 2 days. He's just taken an opiate. And Stockmar cannot get him to wake up. Stockmar himself is desperate to get back to the princess. He has to leave Leopold. He can't rouse him, and he goes back to the princess. When he gets back to her, she grabs his hand and she says, "They've made me tipsy." So she's feeling, obviously, as if she's drunk. Stockmar leaves again, clearly understanding this situation is very dire, and he tries to leave to go and get Leopold again. She cries out for him, Stocky. Clearly, they were quite close by this point. He goes back into the room, and in those just few moments, Charlotte, from calling out to him, has passed. it was a massive shock, obviously, to everyone literally in the room. But the personal, though, and public outpouring of grief. This isn't long after, you know, the wedding where the public are all out and supporting her, the 21st birthday celebrations. She I don't know if we've pointed it out, but she is the only legitimate grandchild of George III at this point. So it goes George III, Prince Regent, Charlotte, and then this baby. That is the line of succession. There is no other legitimate line. And now both Charlotte and her baby are dead. There is no legitimate grandchildren now of George III, only his aging sons. But it's not just a dynastic grief by any means. It's very, very well, we've already mentioned it. If you've been alive during the time when Princess Diana died, that is how it's likened to, this public outcry, outpouring of grief. The MP Henry Brougham wrote that the public's reaction, it really was as though every household throughout Great Britain had lost a favourite child. The poet Lord Byron, who was living in Rome at the time, purportedly threw open his windows, screamed into the street on hearing the news, and said that there was a shock even here and must have been an earthquake at home, is how he described it. People wore black armbands over their clothes. Shops and entertainment venues closed for 2 weeks, as did the Royal Exchange, the law courts, and the docks. The Prince Regent, her father, was distraught. I mean, he could have been a bit better to her in life as well. But anyway, now she's dead, he's distraught. Yet even now, he could not bring himself to show any compassion for Charlotte's mother, his estranged wife, who had been living in Italy since 1812. She only heard the news of her daughter and grandson's passing when a courier who came nearby where she was living came by and obviously knew this news. George had actually refused to send Charlotte's mother a direct message about her daughter's death, which is incredible. According to Leopold's physician Stockmar, Leopold never recovered his happiness. Leopold actually married again in 1832 and became king of the Belgians, and his youngest daughter from that marriage he named Carlotta in memory of Charlotte. Charlotte's funeral took place on the 19th of November at St. George. This is St. George's Chapel, Windsor, which of course would have all seen more recently for Prince Philip and obviously the Queen's funerals. Her father, so the Prince Regent, was too upset to attend. Her mother couldn't get back in time because her father had refused to send this message, so she also wasn't there. So Charlotte was buried with her baby son at her feet, without either of her parents in attendance. I'll come back to the incredible monument to her in a moment. But just to continue this story through to its conclusion, I suppose, that grief that people felt turned to anger. People wanted someone to blame. They wanted to know why this had happened. A post-mortem on the princess had been inconclusive. Some blamed the Prince Regent for some reason for not being in attendance for the birth. I don't know what they thought he was going to do about it. And some people blamed the male midwife, Sir Richard Croft. Tragically, he seems to have maybe not blamed himself. That's probably not something you can say, but he certainly felt the weight of the tragedy on his shoulders. And while he was attending on another woman 3 months later, he shot and killed himself. So in fact, that this whole scenario took 3 lives: Charlotte, the baby boy, and the doctor. Charlotte's memorial that you can see here on the right hand side is at the which bit of which bit of nave? Oh, is it the nave? That big bit of the church. I should know my churches better, but anyway, it's actually sort of tucked away in St George's. I've done some close-ups for you in a minute as well, but the workmanship is absolutely exquisite.
Yeah.
It was created by the sculptor Matthew Coates Wyatt and was funded through public subscription. And you've got all the figures swathed in cloth of some sort. It's incredibly delicate. Now, if you see, so you've got mourners, you've got 4 mourners around the covered up body of Charlotte. You can see her fingertips coming out below the cloth. If you actually look close, I couldn't get it much closer without it getting too grainy, but you can see the cloth on the face actually starts to pick out the nose and the eye socket. It's really stunning. If you ever get a chance to go to St George's, make sure you don't miss this, because it actually is incredibly easy to miss. It's kind of, if you walked in the main doors like you see at the royal weddings, it would be on your left, if that helps. And so Charlotte's depicted lying and covered, and above that she is rising to heaven, 2 angels by her side, one of which you will see is carrying the baby boy. It's just an absolutely, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite as moving, because it's so simple, and yet tells this story. You can't help but miss that this is a tragic death, as opposed to, you know, it clearly was something that was very untimely. And just things like her fingers coming out from underneath the cloth, I think that's the bit that gets me the most. Now, as I said, there's now no legitimate heir below the sons of George III, of which most of them haven't made legitimate marriages. They've been off. I'm going to take this lovely picture of Charlotte off while I talk about the shaggers. They've been off doing their thing, not thinking it too important. So they're now told, you've got to get married. We need some heirs to the throne, and it's nuts. It's bizarre. Edward, Duke of Kent, he's already 50 years old. He marries the bereaved Leopold's sister, 32-year-old Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, on the 18th of May 1818. Their daughter is born on the 24th of May 1819 at Kensington Palace. Of course, that baby was christened Victoria. As the legitimate child of the superior line, she was heir ahead of her 2 male cousins, who were both named George, because clearly trying to win favour somehow. All born within weeks of each other. It's quite incredible. But of course, Victoria does go on to become Queen Victoria, 29th of June 1837, just days after her 18th birthday. And then her incredible parenting skills led to the 20th century wars, according to Kat, and everything else ever since. So there you go. So we actually only have Victoria literally born because of Charlotte's death and everything that came from that.
And I mean, the other thing is, we always talk about how, like, all of George IV's brothers were shaggers with their mistresses who had legitimate heirs. But of course, he did have a fuck ton of sisters too. But George III was weird about his daughters.
Right.
Weird. And like kept them in this little chocolate box dollhouse at Kew and refused to get married. And loads of those girls had love affairs or passions for, you know, people in the hussars or various men in like jodhpurs and long boots with rapiers at their hips. So yeah, the passion for men in uniform that Charlotte seems to have shown is also replicated in her aunts. But yeah, George III. If he'd married off his daughters, then we would not have got this problem.
It's insane, really, that it took that. A tragedy though it was very. It was putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen that scene from Bridgerton where you've got it's done the rounds and the sound is like so memeable, I suppose is the word you'd use, and it's Queen Charlotte, so Charlotte's grandmother, George IV's mother, George III's wife, and she comes in and she's got all of the boys and all of the girls around, and she says something along the lines of, "We had one heir, and she's dead." And then her son starts crying and she goes, "Sorrows, sorrows, prayers." And then she talks about how all they've got is unmarried daughters and a whole bunch of bastard babies. And she's like, "You will all put away your mistresses and start knocking up your wives. Get you some wives."
Yeah.
Needs must.
Bizarre for it to have got to that stage. They really just they seem like they're so what would the right word be? It was someone else's problem to deal with.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that you come from the Tudors, where this desperation for the preservation of the dynasty and for heirs, that gives way to the Stuarts, which ultimately finds its conclusion in the daughters that come after their own father. And then we come into this Hanoverian dynasty where the Hanoverians eat their young. And what you have from George I onwards, arguably to the present day, are people who recognize, in some cases, recognize the onerous nature of what they're taking on, what it means to reign but not rule. And the vast majority are there under sufferance. There is not necessarily in the Georges, they hate each other, but I think also by the time you get to George IV's generation, it's such a miserable experience to be part of this family. Nobody wants to consign a child to being part of it.
To me, it comes across as more selfish like that. It's like they're contemptuous of their lot in life. They're fine to take the money, but they don't want any of the responsibility.
Yeah.
Fine, if you're not going to give me any real responsibility, then sod you, I'm not going to take any at all. I'm just going to take all the good bits. And anyway, he's had a daughter, and she can get married, and she can have babies, and I'm going to carry on doing what I'm doing. It comes across like
they all seem to hate it. It's just, I think as generations move on, that the hate is coupled with, as you'll rightly say, it starts off with a kind of, this is not my problem. But now the kind of misery at the situation is wrapped up in a bow of duty that leaves people feeling hamstrung, I think. But I think it's a direct lineage from the Hanoverians, what's going on today.
Talk about obviously Victoria's mental state due to the Kensington system and the mother and that idiot whose name I've forgotten for some reason. Thank you. And all of this type of business. With us discussing it here now, I suppose I've never really thought about this before. The same thing must have occurred to Victoria. I'm only here because someone that people actually liked died.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, it's
I think
like
if she had any kind of introspection,
her parents told her that they only had her because they wanted a playmate for her sister. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have had her.
Yeah, if Victoria had that level of introspection, then perhaps she would have felt that. She did spend most of her time being like, poor fatherless girl. She's the past master, isn't she? She hopped up on the crucifix, and martyrs herself constantly, despite, certainly as the years go on, doing sweet FA.
But I wonder whether, because then Edward VII was not taking it too seriously, was he?
No.
But then when you get to the Georges, well, then you get, George V does, Edward VIII doesn't, George VI definitely does, the Queen definitely does.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder whether that's just because of the personalities they were, or whether they decided to act in a different way consciously.
Well, definitely in the raising of Victoria, that the argument, one of the arguments for the Kensington house system, was a way of separating her from the legacy of the Hanoverians and the naughty Georges. But then, of course, her son is a shagger, but she was also a shagger.
Oh dear!
But she didn't want the babies that came with the shagging.
She did not like the baby that came with the shagging.
Amanda Stanton says, "What's that puppet show in the UK that mocks the royal family?"
Spitting
Image. If you go back to it originally in the 80s, used to cover a lot of the politicians and stuff as well. It's absolutely brilliant. I think Spitting Image would cheer us all up, to be honest.
They didn't come back, didn't it?
They did bring it back, but it was only
funny anymore.
Random cable shows that they just used to put snippets of it on YouTube. They had pretty. I was going to say how they described some of the characters then, but I don't know if we can. But it was very good, but it wasn't a patch on the original.
Yeah, I think the thing is the new series, like particularly with it, in the same way, like the thick of it, it's very hard to make a satirical, situational, political comedy or sketch show like that anymore, because the truth is parodic. It is on April the 1st, I'm looking at things coming out and I'm going, I have no idea if this is an April Fool's joke or not, because the shit that is put out by various global governments, around the world, just makes me go, am I Delulu? Like, have I slipped reality here? What is happening?
It's yes, it would be. You just can't tell. Satire has eaten itself.
Yes, but also and as well. So Charlotte's widower arranges the marriage of his sister to the Duke of Kent. He is then fundamental in arranging Albert's marriage to Victoria. So Uncle Leopold is around.
He doesn't go, does he?
Yeah, pulling the strings of the British crown.
He
for
also,
a fair old while.
Well, he also doesn't he keep taking this £50,000 a year, even though he's gone back. He keeps taking his salary of £50,000 a year.
Don't blame him.
He's like, I'm not giving that back.
I wouldn't either.
Very much.
Under the circumstances.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very. It's interesting considering, how many. I suppose George, the Prince Regent, was just so exceptionally unpleasant and unpopular that anybody looked like a better option. But she really was so adored and so beloved, and I wonder how.
It does sound like she was rather naughty, though. I do wonder a bit, though, whether some of the control of her was because, like, when you talked about the first guy, the one that she was the captain that she was exchanging letters with,
Charles Hess, yeah.
He was 15 at that time.
Yeah.
She could have got herself into some serious hot water, and she was the only legitimate grandchild.
Yeah.
And
And who she marries, or who she has children with particularly, is a matter.
it's a matter of state.
It's yeah. Yeah.
There's no getting around that.
I think it's also fair to point out that had she been caught short, shall we say, what would have happened if something had progressed beyond wherever it went and she had ended up pregnant? That would be a one-way ticket for her to an asylum.
Yeah.
That would have been a sign that she was too mentally unstable to rule as a
Certainly.
woman.
Mm.
Because women were locked away for less.
Yes.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it. So I do wonder, although we don't like him and we like her, whether there was an element of, this is for her own good for a bit until she gets some maturity. It sounds like she had a lot of her mother in her. Like when you were talking about how she was sort of a bit brash, and that's how her mother was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe she emulated her. Part of it was maybe just maybe like emulating her mother
Just to annoy her father.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
I do wonder if she had become queen, how many diplomatic incidences she might have been responsible for.
But it would have been fun finding out.
It would have been.
She would have been, what was she, 21, 22, 21 when she died? Yes, 21.
Yeah.
And how do I say this tactfully? There is an angel effect.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Of someone taken too young, of course.
Yeah.
But there is that as well.
Definitely. And I think also the fact that her memory then gets further mediated through a Victorian lens, and that kind of that romanticization of female almost martyrdom, like for example that really famous painting of the execution of Lady Jane Grey, which is a complete fantasy creation, but it is definitely meant to portray that kind. It's very Victorian gaze coded. It's about this is what they want to see. And I think when you've got that memorial in St George's Chapel, and when you've got the narratives about her as this essentially sacrificial lamb, that in many ways Victoria is the inheritrix of, it does become very easy to. And also at 21, because her father lives for
too long.
She would not have been queen until she was well into her 30s, if I'm correct.
Now I can check.
She dies in 1817. I can't remember when Prince Regent dies.
Hey Siri, when did George IV die? 1830.
That's maths I can't do. She's 21 in 1817.
She'd be like 34, 35, would she? By the time she would have been.
So she's into her 30s. And if she
her baby would already have been then 14, 15.
Yeah.
I wonder whether it would have skipped.
Of course, by then as well, she would theoretically have had more children too. And while our culture loves young dead women, and they also love mothers, what they like less are people who have been mothers and are now coming to what was deemed to be the end of their childbearing years. then they can become the villain of the story. Particularly there's a 14, 15-year-old boy who's been sent away to school, who can then become the Great Hope.
I think it would have depended how she developed.
Young lads have to be strapping young lads, don't they?
She'd clearly have needed to have developed some more savviness that she didn't seem to demonstrate before.
Yes, but equally, you've also got a country that, her father positioned himself as the kind of the victor of the Napoleonic Wars. The wars that come after that are less good. They're not good wars. They're bad wars.
They're awesome.
They're less fun wars. They are more disastrous wars, but they're also bloody expensive.
On a scale of 1 to war, how bad?
Yeah. So I don't think that she would have had a good time, because she would not have been ruling over a country that had a whole heap of national spirit. So that would have been really tough, I think. However much she developed, that would have been really tough for her.
That would have been tough. No, you're right. That would have been tough.
Well, starting with war is always a good way of generating some national spirit, isn't it?
Only if it's a popular war. Only if it's a popular war.
Yeah, you can normally find ways of doing these things, can't you?
Yeah,
that's just what PR you put behind it. Exactly. Your PR machine.
Exactly. So there goes. That's a great what if-tery, though, that one, isn't it? If Princess Charlotte hadn't died and we didn't get Victoria, that is.
Yeah,
I've got a feeling we would have stopped everything.
That's almost up there with what if Arthur Tudor had lived.
Yeah.
My favourite one is one I did for my channel, which is what if Henry Fitzroy had lived. That's been my favourite one, because I genuinely think he would have been king after Edward.
Yeah, I do.
Genuinely
he
think.
was lining him up.
Yeah,
I mean, the positions he was given and the titles obviously he had.
And look, if he still regarded Mary and Elizabeth as bastards, but they were put back in the line of succession. They weren't made legitimate. I think that Fitzroy would have been head of Edward's council, and he would have inherited from him.
Because he would have had the same status. He could have put him in the line of succession without legitimizing him as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as he was male, theoretically, after Edward, but before Mary or Elizabeth.
I wonder.
Steve asked, did we say what she died from? My understanding is they think that she retained placenta.
But of course they do. Well, so yes, but that's what because she bled heavily afterwards. She clearly was getting some sort of infection, which would indicate that. At the time, though, they didn't diagnose exactly what had happened, so it's difficult. But
yeah, and they probably didn't. They probably it's very. My understanding is that it's very difficult if you. I don't even know if it was standard procedure at the time to check that the placenta was complete.
No, goodness knows. Goodness knows.
But yeah,
this guy seems to have been, he was a male midwife as opposed to, it wasn't the, what we've seen in it prior to that, where the Queen gets a doctor who's never been near a woman labouring, because that's normally a midwife's job. That doesn't seem to have been quite the case here, and obviously he took it very clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, with today, with any part of retained placenta, that's surgical. That's a surgical intervention.
So, I don't know when that became the standard practice to check. Now they really check through it, don't they?
I mean, it could equally be the fact that it could simply have been blood loss. If they aren't if she's exhausted, presumably she's not taking the baby to the breast. They haven't got the medication to shrink the uterus down. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. When the placenta detaches, you've got a dinner plate size wound in an internal organ. So that's one of the reasons why, if you have a vaginal birth, they massage you to try and contract down the uterus. If you have a section,
I didn't get that.
No, I don't get any massages. No, not if you're showing signs of it's doing it itself. They check you for it.
Oh, see, now what they do is they come in and they are like hours afterwards they try and massage it down. It's different if you've had a section, because one of the things they do is, and also you tend to have less postpartum bleeding with a section because they sort of scoop you before they seal you up. Give you an old scooping.
Pretty Pictures, we need to do an alternate history special. That could be one of our special weeks. We're going to have a rant week. We can have an alternative history week. We can have a ghost week.
Yeah, I saw somebody higher up talk about how it's now no longer the advice to not let women eat. That's in the UK. My understanding is if you're in a midwife-led unit, they're like, eat what you want, whatever you can keep down. But from things I've seen from people in the US, that's not the advice. Basically the second you rock up in the hospital, it's like ice chips or nothing else. Whereas bring me a pizza.
No, with both of mine, so we're talking 2010 and 2016, they said don't eat anything in case something happens and you have to have an anaesthetic, so they don't water and the smallest amount possible.
I just couldn't have eaten. I threw up everything that I'd eaten.
Yeah, I threw up on the first one.
In 2020, that was not the advice.
I think they would have allowed me, and that was 2005 and 2008. I think they would have let me. I just didn't.
They wouldn't let me have anything.
Oh, I didn't want to.
So 2020, they were like, eat what you want, bring snacks, do what you want. And even when I went for the section because of the failed inductions, I think I had breakfast before I went down for it.
Blimey.
I guess they must have been fairly confident you wouldn't need a general then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now they would, as I did with the first one, I was just like, I feel very sick. I don't.
Yeah.
But there was one point where I really could have done with something to eat, but they were, and then with the second one, I was just in so much pain, I just didn't even care.
We delivered a KFC after Gabriel was born.
That's so London.
Now it's had the Deliveroo guy bring it as well.
Yeah, Uber Eats at the door.
Well, of course, and because it was COVID, like Jamie had to go and wait by the door and like direct him to which part he could then sneak back in. Like everything was just stupid. A bugger's muddle.
Just very stupid.
Right then, ladies.
Philippa, what's happening next week?
So I need to go. Next week, it's Roundup Week. Yay!
Jingle Week. Jingle Week.
So you got to come and help us with the scoring, because we're going to score the last 4 heroes that we've done, which were Test.
William L. Marshall, Florence Nightingale, Alfred the Great, Charlotte the Hope of Hanover.
There you go.
Look at her.
And I looked on the drive today to see it was you doing Word of the Week.
And I presume that's where you got the link to this from.
It was.
As I said, that was where I was putting it. Good. Well done.
She's got it.
I was tempted that if you'd messaged me before, I was going to say, I was just going to ignore it.
No, I was there. I do check though before, because I had Pilates right before I teach Pilates. Before this, so now I check to make sure it's there, so there's no last minute panic. But this all worked well, but it wouldn't work before. I had problems with Zoom and everything before with my Pilates class before this. So it was just like,
well, this one worked, which is good. So next week is
Roundup Week.
Roundup Week. So let's do the things.
If you would like to support us, if you want to buy us mini Winnebagos, or indeed join us over on Close Friends on Instagram, which is essentially Catherine finds some depraved history memes and puts them up in our stories. And if you're a close friend, you get to see them. You can do that at www.buymeacoffee.com/hadpodcast.
Add the dirty bridge, don't I? That I found.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering what that was about, but yes, I'm back in the room. Did we
put the book in? Belvoir. Did we put the book in?
Beaver book?
The Beaver's Promise. Well, I've said it now. So.
No, we'll find it now.
Yeah. I think I did.
If you've got
a few Beaver memes, so
Yeah, if you've got a past problems post bag that you would like to email over,
Yes.
you can send that to historyafterdark2021@gmail.com.
That's aging us now.
What else is there?
You can follow
Substack.
us. Yes. There it is. History After
If
Dark.
you would like to join our Substack, it will become the hub. That is History After Dark Hub, all one word, .substack.com. Please check out our merch. We have all sorts. Mugs.
I was going to put my beaver top on and I didn't have time.
Yeah, Catherine's got a rough beaver to show you. Philippa's got a History After Dark mic. I have some sliders that say no feet free on the internet, which is advice to live by, friends.
It is, yeah.
That's everything, isn't it?
That's everything. Yeah.
You can follow us on Instagram as well. After.dark.
What's that?
You can follow us on Instagram as well.
Oh, yes.
Dark. Which you need to be there if you want to join close friends anyway, but every now and again I'll put up something a bit random.
Do you know what Philippa said a couple of days ago in our group chat? She said, I've got a feeling that Princess Charlotte's going to be a nice tight hour.
Yeah, but then Catherine started in the middle. I don't know why I ever think we're going to stay as an hour.
Interesting. It's very
and we did, and so now we're nearly 2 hours. So
yeah,
we are going to love you all, and we're going to see you for some chats next time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to count us out in 3, 2, 1. Bye.